Welcome back to the meeting. Thanks everybody for your patience. We're going to go straight. Councillor Molyneux.
Yeah, could I just apologise to the committee for taking this length of time? Obviously, I have major concerns over that, but the more we look into this, it's almost like the South Ribble are already, from my point of view, too high. So it's difficult to start trying to change this. So I am more swayed to just go to reject. Just for information. Thank you.
So now we'll just ask for any proposals.
I propose to reject and ask the association to come back to us when they can with new proposals, but I move to reject.
70 seconds.
I'll second the proposition to reject.
So we'll take a vote now, but we'll do a named vote. Okay. So Councillor Buttery, how do you want to vote? Reject.
Is that to reject?
Is that to reject the?
This is for or against.
For or against the. Sorry, for or against the proposal. Councillor Lomax.
I am for the proposal.
Councillor Martin. Councillor Molyneux. Councillor Smith. Councillor Watson. Councillor Wharton Hardman. Councillor Alty. 4. Right. Unanimous vote then. So members have proposed to refuse the proposed increase and invite the trade to come back with any further proposals to the tariff. Yeah.
So, Councillor Molyneux.
Could we just ensure that does come back quickly? Because obviously there is a concern about Christmas and that for the drivers. Thank you.
So in order to come back, you have to have a firm proposal. I think what we can take away from this is that there's a lot of interest in this matter and it wasn't taken lightly. So a lot of consideration's been given to it, and possibly it might feel too much time has been given to it, but I think it was worth examining more fully and thrashing out the details of it. So I hope kind of if and when you do come back with another proposal, or even maybe suggest 2 or 3 alternatives from the trade, then we can give the matter some more thought. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry the outcome wasn't what you wanted. Moving on to agenda item 7. I'm going to hand over to Chris to present this item, and then members of the public will be invited to speak first. I have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, the Business and Planning Act 2020 obtained royal assent on the 22nd of July 2020 with the aim of supporting local businesses and helping economic recovery as the COVID-19 restrictions were put in place by the government. The Act introduced temporary fast-track process for businesses to obtain permission in the form of a pavement licence from the local authority for the placement of furniture and tables on the public highway. It was to help premises maximise the capacity while adhering to social distancing guidelines. Any business selling food or drink may apply for a pavement licence, not just licensed premises. Last year, the government decided to extend the cafe payment licences for another year, which now expire on the 30th of September 2022. Again, the government's decided to extend this for another 12 months to the 30th of December 2023. This is via the Business and Planning Act 2022, Payment Licences, Coronavirus Amendment, Regulations 2022. In 2020, the fee for a payment licence was set at £100. It's recommended that the Council confirms to retain the same fee of £100 for each payment licence in line with the maximum amount specified by government. The policy and application forms have been updated with the new dates on, and it can be found attached to the report as Appendix 1 and 2 respectively. Members are asked to approve the extended payment licensing for another 12 months, adopting the new legislation. If members agree to extend the payment cafe licensing issued by this licensing authority, then a report will be taken to the next meeting of the full council for final approval. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Charles, do you have anything to? No comment on this. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. This has been quite beneficial to businesses, especially in Penwelham that I know of, and other areas I've visited, and it's created quite a nice sort of vibe on the high street. So it doesn't look all square like something out of Minecraft or something like that. It looks organic rather than just these square blocks that everyone has to hide behind. So I would like to propose that we go with this, that we extend this to 2023, as it says, that the fee is £100 still, and we allow the delegation to officers. Thank you.
Councillor Molyneux.
I'd like to second that, Chair.
Does anybody else have a comment or anything they want to offer? No. Okay, so a vote is required to agree to extend the proposal duration of granting of payment licences until 30th of September as per Business Planning Act 2020, to confirm the level of fee charged in respect of applications for pavement licences issued under the Business and Planning Act 2020, and to extend delegated authority to officers as described in paragraph 22 of this report. Councillor Keith Martin has proposed it. Councillor Molyneux has seconded it. Would you like to take us to a vote?
Members have unanimously decided to vote in favour of the proposals.
Moving on to another meaty topic, CCTV policy. I'm going to ask Chris to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So we have another PowerPoint for this one, so I'll just share my screen, hopefully a little bit quicker this time. So agenda item 8, CCTV policy. So recently officers have received requests from members, the taxi trade and trade representatives asking that the policy on CCTV to be reconsidered again before members, with the possibility of a mandatory policy investigated. The issue of mandatory CCTV has been on the agenda for some time. Previously, the committee have explored the option of mandatory CCTV within the licensed vehicles in 2008 and 2020, but as an authority, we've not been able to evidence-base a decision to mandate the CCTV for vehicles licensed by South Ribblesborough Council. The report before you today asks members to decide if they would like to explore the possibility of a mandatory CCTV policy, taking into account the guidance from the Department of Transport, the Information Commissioner's Office, the Surveillance Camera Commission and Local Government Association. CCTV is widely seen as a way forward in safeguarding both drivers and passengers. It gives confidence and reassurance to the public and drivers. People are more likely to police their own behaviour inside vehicles. They can provide an important evidence base for criminal investigations, deterring and preventing the occurrence of crime, reducing the fear of crime, and assisting the police and insurance companies investigating incidents of crime or accidents. Current policy wording on CCTV in licensed vehicles can be found in section 19 of the report. It does allow for CCTV within licensed vehicles at the driver's own discretion, subject to the council being given prior notification of the installation. The CCTV must comply with current data protection requirements. It must be capable of storing images, audio files in a manner which is encrypted and prevents them from being downloaded or viewed by the driver or any person travelling in the vehicle. Image audio files may only be downloaded by an authorised officer of the council or police constable, and de-encryption software must be provided to the council. A lifetime licence for the use of such software may be required, and a minimum of 2 CCTV signs are clearly visible and must be in the vehicle. So when seeking the development of a mandatory CCTV policy, various factors should be taken into consideration before deciding or not a mandatory policy is the way forward, such as proportionality and the need for an evidence base, cost of implementation, legal compliance, specification and ICO recommendations, incentives and trade buy-ins. Where CCTV systems are a mandatory requirement, in most circumstances, the Instruction Council will be responsible for controlling and processing the data, called the data controller. The Department for Transport published its statutory taxi and private hire vehicle standards in July 2022, with a strong focus of protecting passengers and users of taxis and private hire vehicles using transport services. The statutory guidance makes it clear that the government expects recommendations contained within it to be implemented unless there is a compelling local reason not to. The DFT's view is that CCTV can provide a safety for passengers and drivers and make it easier for incidents to be investigated. The DFT states that all licensing authorities should consult to identify if there's local circumstances which indicate if the installation of CCTV in vehicles would have either a positive or an adverse effect on the safety of taxi and private hire users, including children and vulnerable adults, taking into account potential privacy issues. The statutory standard states CCTV may increase the level of reporting of sexual offences. CCTV may deter people from seeking a taxi or private hire vehicle with the intent of causing harm. The recording of audio should be used to provide an objective record of the event, such as disputes or inappropriate behaviour, and must not continuously be active by default and should recognise the need for privacy, passengers and private conversations between themselves. Activation of the audio recording capability of a system might be instigated either by the passenger or the driver, but which operates a switch button. Imposition of a blanket requirement to attach CCTV as a condition to a licence is likely to give rise to concerns about the proportionality of such approach and will therefore require an appropriate strong justification, which must be kept under regular review. So a DPIA, Data Protection Impact Assessment, is a mandatory requirement of the Information Commissioner's Office before any CCTV policy is implemented. A DPIA helps you identify and minimise the data protection risks of a CCTV policy and to answer any fundamental tricky questions, including what is our justification for requiring the use of CCTV? Who should the CCTV be operating? Should the driver be able to manually control the system? For what purpose will we use the CCTV footage? How do we ensure that the footage is kept secure and only used for unauthorised persons? Should we allow audio recording, and if so, in what circumstances? How long should the footage be retained? And what are the risks to passengers and drivers' data protection rights and interests? To mandate a policy on CCTV, there does need to be a clear evidence base of an overwhelming need for CCTV in the area. Consideration should be given to the imposition of a condition making CCTV compulsory in vehicles. Clear ways to provide CCTV in South Ribble would be through crime statistics, trade buy-in, public buy-in, number of public complaints received by the authority, number of investigations by the licensing authority, and not all crimes are reported through to the police, so a consultation of the trade is vital. When a taxi driver or private hire driver is working, clearly the use of CCTV would be proportionate and arguably necessary in light of the purpose to combat crime and protect drivers from vulnerable passengers. However, when a taxi private hire driver is off duty, the continuous use of the CCTV recording is likely to be unlawful, unfair and excessive in light of data protection and human rights legislation. There needs to be a clear evidence base for the need for the CCTV. Just implementing a CCTV policy without clear justification could leave the council open to judicial review. GDPR data protection laws state that the users of this technology need to be careful to consider the personal privacy implications before implementing any kind of surveillance system. Many CCTV systems in taxis are active whenever the vehicle is running. The camera may operate continuously whether the driver is using the taxi privately. This would mean the CCTV camera is recording when drivers are picking up their children from school, going shopping with their family, or travelling on holiday. Taxi drivers are entitled to their own personal privacy, particularly when they're not working. Any audio recording system would need to be turned off when the vehicle is not used for personal purpose. The specification of the CCTV units would require meeting the requirements of the ICO. Any CCTV system must be registered with the ICO. According to the ICO, unfair and excessive processing of personal data is unlawful. Processing of personal data must be for a specific purpose and could be a breach of Article 8 of the Human Rights Act 1998, which states everyone has the right to respect to the privacy, private and family life, his home and correspondence. There should be no interference of a public authority with the exercise of this right, such as in accordance with the law and necessary in a democratic society, in the interest of national security, public safety, or the economic well-being of the country, for the prevention of crime and disorder, for the prevention of health and morals, the protection of rights and freedoms of others. CCTV units are relatively modest in price, with an average price of between £390 to £450 when we've researched the market. Officers are currently researching the possibility of grants and funding towards the cost of each unit. Officers are confident of obtaining grants towards either a full or partial cost of the system. But if this was not possible and a mandatory policy was implemented, the cost would fall to the owner of the licensed vehicle to pay for the CCTV. If any mandatory policy was introduced, the council may be challenged legally. This would incur extra legal costs defending a judicial review against the policy. Although the current policy states that drivers can have CCTV in their own vehicles, so far we haven't received, any drivers haven't chosen to install their CCTV in the vehicles by their own choice. Officers could feel this could be because of the cost of the implications to the drivers. As previously mentioned in this presentation, obtaining grants could help drivers with the cost. It would be an excellent incentive for drivers with or without a mandatory policy. Other incentives to the trade could include safeguarding drivers from assault, conflict with passengers, false accusations, making off without payment, reduction in price of insurance on some policies. A revision of the existing tinted windows policy could also be explored further down the line following implementation of a mandatory CCTV policy. So the proposed consultation process, public consultation. So officers propose a consultation of the public to identify if there is any local circumstances which indicate the installation of CCTV in vehicles would have either a positive or adverse effects on the safety of taxi and private hire users, including children and vulnerable adults. Trade consultation. Trade buy-in is obviously essential. A consultation exercise and engagement with the licensed trade will give a feel whether CCTV is wanted by the trade, see if there's any appetite within the trade, and if they feel CCTV would safeguard them as drivers, if it would work as a deterrent from abusive passengers, and if CCTV is not wanted by the trade, for what reason? Is it cost or is it personal privacy? Crime statistics will be obtained from the Lancashire Police, which we've approached Lancashire Police and they are collating crime statistics for us at the moment. A data protection impact assessment will be conducted and sent to the ICO for feedback on a mandatory policy in South Ribble. So the next step, members are now asked to consider whether to proceed to consultation on the proposal to introduce a CCTV in all taxis and private hire vehicles, or allow the status quo to remain, which permits CCTV to be installed by a taxi or private hire vehicle at the driver's discretion, subject to the system being approved by licensing officers. If members choose to go with the first option to consult, a report outlining and analysing the consultation feedback, crime statistics and the DPIA will be presented to members at the next Licensing and Public Safety Committee meeting in December 2022. The report will outline if there is a business case for CCTV as a mandatory requirement necessary in South Ribble. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks for that, Chris. I think what we'll do is ask if member of the public would like to speak on the matter.
Yeah. All right, I'm used to this. Right, only to say a couple of things. Yeah, you're obviously starting me off now. I support the officers. The only one that I have a bit of reservation with is this: the DFT already consulted on this in 2020-21. And this CCTV came out, if my memory serves me correctly, as the top of it, on top of everything. It was more supportive by the public and the trade. There are sections of the trades that doesn't support it. I'm one who does support it. And a lot of my colleagues support it. That's why we push so heavily for this. Yes, we want it mandatory because it's an all-win situation. The council wins, the driver wins, and more on your side of it, the public wins. Because then you have evidence of anything that goes on in that vehicle. And that can only be good for the trade, for the drivers and for members of the public and for licensing committees who have to sit in judgment over these complaints or allegations, whatever. So I agree. I personally, Chair, I'd want it coming in yesterday, mandatory and the pay for. The trade is beyond me because what price do they put on their safety? We've had drivers killed, murdered. We have umpteen attacks on drivers, thefts from motor vehicles. And all this is suffered by the trade, and the cost mainly comes back down on the trade about these things. And it's only if we start getting CCTVs in that we can get these people into court. We've had 2 cases recently, but I'm not going to go in, don't worry. And the passenger who made the complaint made off without payment. Now, I asked Chris if he would divulge, and quite correctly, he didn't. I don't have a problem with that. I know the avenues I can go down there, but if we had CCTV footage, and I'm not saying the drivers of that was squeaky clean, but he should not have made off without pay. Anyway, so I'm going to wind up simply with this, that it is an all-win situation and the trade wants it. So I ask members to consider it very closely and go down the realms of introducing this tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Councillor Molyneux.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's good to hear the trade saying that, because it just makes sense that it does cover both parties, both the passenger and the driver, and, the sooner the better. But I do understand, there's a lot of possible problems from a security point of view, whether people want to be filmed or not, but that's the reason why we put it out to consultation. So I'm really happy that we should be moving forward with this, put it to consultation and see what we get back from the public. But that's a very positive from the trade, a very positive response. And the other thing about the cost, when we were talking about this several months ago, there seemed to be a concern about the cost. And I was thinking it was going to be in thousands rather than a few £100 that we're talking about here. And I think there's, we mentioned about there's ways and means of being able to raise that money for the drivers if needed. And I think that's a very positive move from our point of view. And I'd like to just move forward with this as soon as possible. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, it's just consultation at the moment. Councillor Wharton-Hardman.
Likewise, I think this is a positive for everyone. There are obviously going to be different views, and I'd like to second that proposition that we move this forward for consultation.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Molyneux, did you propose?
Can I just say, I've just seen it saying it's for noting. Do you need to vote on it?
No, we will be doing a vote on it. It's
I'll propose it then. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just a few questions. I hope you're ready. If I'll try and do them in order. CCTV. We've heard that there's the drivers come in from outside of the borough. Would they be required to have the CCTV, or is it just South Ribble registered drivers?
Just us, unfortunately, our drivers only, Councillor. It's the requirement of our policy, and only our drivers have to abide by that policy. So it wouldn't be external cross-border working drivers or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, there's guidance from the Surveillance Camera Commission and the Information Commissioner. One of the things that come up was the court case ICO versus Southampton Borough Council, City Council. The audio recording was the issue there, and I know that there may be ways round that. And I know the Warrington report as well sort of says, well, everyone's got CCTV, let's have it. And I find that the wrong attitude, really. So with that court case, the issue was with the constant recording of the audio, but if there was an option that it was just once the contract, because my issue would be around the contract. Once the contract would have been agreed, then the audio could be turned off and it could just be monitoring the movements of the passenger. So that's one question.
Do you want me just to answer that?
Yeah, go on.
Is that okay? What was found with Southampton was it was continuous audio recording, but the systems that we've found have got a button on. So there's no audio recording. So they've got a panic switch in the front, a panic switch in the back, and the audio recording is actually recording in the background, and it has 30 seconds prior to that button being switched on, that then the audio recording becomes available and saved onto the hard drive of the CCTV system. So it's not continuously recording audio, it's only when that panic button's been switched on. So you've got one for the passenger in the back and one for the driver in the front, because it works both ways for passengers and drivers, doesn't it?
Okay. My interpretation of licensing for such things, I mean, cameras are licensed for different options, and they'd have specific specifications for whatever option they're licensed for. So with the audio, would there be an indication that the audio recording had now been activated? For instance, would a red light come on that would say this? So if that button was pushed, I think.
Yeah, there's a red light on the switch. It's just a switch with an LED light on that lights up once that button's been pressed, and it's working. Yeah, I think when we come back after the consultation exercise, we'll come back with proposed systems as well, which we'll look at. At the moment, we've just been sort of costing it out how much we think it's roughly going to work out at, but we'll have a list of approved installers that we'll go out to tender for. And then those approved systems will be approved by us, and they would have the switches on, which that's one of the requirements we can ask for, that there's an LED light there that lights up.
Okay. Do you want me to read them all out and then you can fight amongst yourselves? Because I do have. Okay, but I'll do
Happy
it
for you
slowly.
to do that.
Obviously, some of our drivers have contracts with Lancashire County Council, and they transport vulnerable adults, sometimes on their own and sometimes with a carer or a passenger assistant, as they're called. So, would it be prudent to contact LCC? The second question, I would worry about people who may be under a witness protection scheme or suffered some sort of abuse in the past and may not want them, would go to all costs to avoid being recorded for fear, more for their own fear of that recording being accessed by someone that they may not want to, or so I don't know how the rules would go around that. And the same would go with vulnerable adults. The other bit was obviously there's a reference in here for an override button. So when the driver wants to use his car for personal use, it says it's under the bonnet. That would be probably the case here. What happens and where do we go if the vehicle is either stolen or sold without the camera system removed, or is involved in an RTA and removed by a third party for investigation? So how would the data be accessed there? Would we get that box? And lastly, how much would a subject access request cost the council to proceed with? Because obviously we have to do it for free, don't we? Or to a certain degree, and blot out all the paces of people who may be outside the vehicle if it's captured them as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Should we take the first one that you mentioned? So can you just remind me of the first one that you said, because it was about LCC and vulnerable adults. So as I understand it, there are separate contracts with LCC. So it would be up to, because they're obviously LCC contracts, I think that would have to be a discussion that you have with LCC, and licensing would have to be done to address that.
The LCC contracts state that it has to be compliant with South Ribble's licensing policy. So that would cover that. I think when we come back after consultation, I'll give you the option whether you want to grant some sort of exemptions as well from having it in the vehicle. So if there is an issue with the driver not wanting it, or if there is an issue with LCC not wanting vulnerable children to be filmed on CCTV, I guess exemptions could be granted to that vehicle which are being driving that child round. A lot of the vulnerable children which are being driven, say by Wallbanks, who've got a lot of the contracts, they've got specific vehicles for that specific child. So it could be that an exemption for a certain reason that a certain child shouldn't be filmed could be granted onto that vehicle, so there's no CCTV. Even though it's a blanket policy, you could grant exemptions as well under certain circumstances.
To answer your question on that part, can you just remind us what the second part was? May as well just go through them.
Witness protection.
So that's quite a difficult one. It'd be the same policy, really. Not sure how to address that, really. I think we'd have to put exemptions. Do you want to answer it?
The data's the footage is encrypted on the vehicle, so it's under the footage is actually encrypted, and they have to provide us with encryption software. So without that encryption software with the codes and passwords, you wouldn't be able to get into that footage for starters. It's also locked in the vehicle under lock and key, and we've only got the key as well. So they can't access it physically, and they can't actually access the software on there either. So it's encrypted and it's locked up by a lock and key.
The other one was if the vehicle was stolen or destroyed or taken away because it's part of another crime or something like that.
I think it's a similar sort of scenario, really, because, yeah, it would a similar scenario as before, really. It's under lock and key, and if it is taken out by the police, then they would have to get permission, really. Well, if it's involved in a crime, it then becomes a cross-party situation then. And they may be able to ask to get that evidence from the council. Just so you know, that the CCTV footage is actually owned by the council if it's in the taxi, so we have responsibility for that. The taxi driver isn't responsible for that data, just to make that clear to members. So the council are responsible for all that data. So if it's lost, etc., we will face the penalty of that, not the driver. Yeah.
That was my concern, is if it was stolen and never recovered, then that could have an issue on us.
I mean, it depends on what I'm assuming what the systems are so advanced now. A lot of them are, you can download the data remotely. So I'm assuming that, I don't know if it's like a black box system where you can lock it down and protect it that way. So, I mean, I'm not familiar with the CCTV. Chris can take
If
over.
we put that in the data impact assessment and send that off to the ICO, we can get a response from them on that as well, can't we? So we'll get an answer from that before we make any decision.
Because obviously someone else's actions could put us at risk.
Yeah.
So which is not a good thing. And I think the last one was just who would have to pay for the subject access request on this, because obviously the driver might want it to prove a case, or the pedestrian, the person using the taxi might want to use it to prove it. So who would be responsible for that, and where would the cost lie with that?
So all the data would be owned by the council, not the driver. And at the moment, we can't charge for subject access requests. They're just, if somebody wants data about themselves, and we have to disclose that. If it's excessive, then we can then start charging. So the cost is like FOR requests. It's on the council.
Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, personally, I would want this in my taxi if I were a taxi driver. I can certainly understand there'd be concerns, a kind of Orwellian overtures of some of this, and some people clearly won't want that as well as a consequence. But obviously, if we're going to be approving the systems that are installable, so we've got control of that. We're not exposed. We're not allowing the taxi driver to do it. So there's not other concerns about workarounds that possibly it might have to be installed by a recommended person. I don't really know. I'm assuming it would have to be in that case, again, to avoid those kind of workarounds. So yeah, and we'd only be accessing the data if it was required to be accessed. Obviously, otherwise it's just going to remain encrypted and eventually be deleted. So, or if ever downloaded, depending on how it gets to us, whether that be remotely or through a physical download. But even from a cost perspective, where we were looking at getting the grant and so on, so much of this could be offset by insurance, as you mentioned in the report. I mean, it may very well be a cost positive for the actual taxi driver from a reduction in insurance costs, hopefully, with any grant that we were to enable. So it makes more sense than not to me, but obviously it's this consultation at the moment, and we'd have to see how the other taxi drivers and so on, the companies react. But yeah, I'm in agreement, and I'll be voting for this to go through today. Thank you.
Anybody else would to contribute? No. What are you thinking?
Sorry. It's fun, this. Obviously, you've alluded that there could be a discount in insurance, things like that. Could that be evidenced in the report? Just because I'm interested in that as well, because it might be something that we may benefit from as a council.
Yeah, we'll evidence-base all of that. We'll look at what grants are available. I think further down the line, we'll look at that at the next meeting, but definitely we'll look at cost effect. We need trade buy-in, so things of cost and the cost of what grants we can get towards cost, incentives with like the insurance, things like that. We'll investigate that and give you all the statistics when we come back. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think a conversation demonstrates another complex matter that needs careful consideration. A vote is required to determine whether to proceed to consultation on the proposal to introduce CCTV in all taxis and private hire vehicles, or allow the status quo to remain, which permits CCTV to be installed in a taxi or private hire vehicle at the driver's discretion, subject to the system being approved by SRBC. If consultation is agreed, members will need to agree to receive a report advising of the results of that consultation. We have a proposer in Councillor Molyneux, and we have a seconder in Councillor Paul Wharton-Hardman. So can we move to a vote, please? I think it's show of hands. Yeah. So we're voting to go for a consultation. Okay. Are you unanimous? Thank you very much. Mr. Oakes, is that, I think that's the final item on the agenda for which press and public are invited. So can I thank you for attending and your contribution tonight? Thank you. Right, guys, it's been a long night. I'm sorry about that. Apparently, I have to invite you to vote on whether we exclude press and public. So, can we exclude press and public? Is that okay?